Welcome back to another episode of Law Enforcement Today. I'm Lieutenant Ryan Shea, here with Kyle once again to talk everything law enforcement. You know, this show is about bridging the gap between civilian and civil servant. I bring the civil servant side. Kyle brings his opinionated,
good looks, charming personality, and overwhelming attitude to the game.
Civilian side. And we talk about everything that impacts law enforcement. So
we have seen far too many officers killed in the line of duty. But the other thing that we've seen too is a lot of officers who have been wounded, shot, stabbed, run over. And you'll hear mainstream media reports all day long saying this officer is going to make a complete recovery. Let me tell you something, man. I've met a lot of these guys that the media said they're going to make a complete recovery. You will never be back to 100%. Physically, you may be 90%. 98%, but there's also that emotional component. And I think that we're doing a huge disservice, not just to our law enforcement officers, but their families and friends and survivors and supporters by not having conversations about those invisible wounds, don't you think?
Absolutely. When you think about the things that go through a law enforcement officer's mind when they're attacked or when they have to take the life of another, certainly a full recovery, maybe physically, but mentally, that'll impact them for the rest of their lives. And it's something that in law enforcement over the past probably 20 years, we've really become better at looking at and better at looking at the welfare of the officer post those incidents, either post, a attack on a law enforcement officer, post an officer involved shooting. And there's a lot of things that come into play and a lot of different organizations that assist law enforcement in this.
If you get stabbed in the leg and your partner loses his leg, right? I can see the physical difference in the injuries between the two of you. But if both of you respond to an incident like Sandy Hook, not only can we not see the impact that it's had on you because it's an emotional impact, but the other thing that impacts it too that a lot of people don't think about is how you were raised and the experiences that you've had over time and the calls that you've responded to. We work very closely with Save a Warrior. It's a 501c3 that helps men and women who are in law enforcement, fire, military, who are suffering from severe post-traumatic stress. And one of the things that they talked about with us when we were out there in Ohio was that I believe the number was 80% of officers and veterans who suffer from post-traumatic stress had some form of early childhood trauma that impacted them and created a form of post-traumatic stress long before they even went into their arm of service. And so we need to recognize and understand that these invisible wounds impact people in so many different ways. We're also blessed to work now with the Wounded Blue. Wounded Blue is another great 501c3 that they help out wounded officers physically, spiritually, emotionally. And so over the coming year in 2020, we're going to be sharing a lot more stories of these wounded officers. We're going to have more of them here at the Whiskey Wall and just give them a voice. So should we bring on the guests? You got to get out of here, but how about I do some interviews today? All right, so I'm excited to introduce to you all Larry. I can't give you your title. You were just telling me that thing. It's like 4 paragraphs long. What's your title again?
I'm the Senior Vice President for Government and Public Affairs and General Counsel for the National Shooting Sports Foundation, which is the Firearms Industry Trade Association. And on Wednesday, I put the garbage out.
Perfect. NSSF, he's the guy. You guys know NSSF for no other reason than for SHOT Show, which right. I'm sure many of these guys have been to. So what I don't think a lot of people realize is that outside of SHOT Show, which is sort of like if you're a guy like me, it's like going to a candy store when you're a little kid. Talk to me a little bit about why NSSF was created and what you guys do outside of SHOT.
So we were formed in 1961, originally sort of as a captive public relations firm for the industry, but it's grown obviously tremendously since then, and we're really now a traditional trade association. So our goal is our job is to help the industry promote, protect, and preserve hunting and the shooting sports, and that is everything from increasing participation, getting more kids out to participate in the shooting sports, with their parents or out of field trying hunting. But on the political side or the government relations side, we also have a Washington, D.C. office that I run. And, we lobby Congress, we lobby in the states, we work closely with federal regulators like ATF and the FBI who run the background checks and other government agencies that touch the industry. So it's pretty comprehensive. The SHOT Show is really a big, important event for us. It's really an important source of revenue for all the things that NSSF does.
Sure.
But that's sort of the government relations side. We also have a robust sort of public affairs part of NSSF that I run as well. And our job there is to get the word out to mainstream media and all kinds of outlets about all of the things the industry is doing as responsible corporate citizens. And right now we have a major initiative called Real Solutions for Safer Communities. And that is a number of different components to it, and things that we've been doing for literally 2 decades in some cases, and some newer initiatives where we're responding to challenges that confront the industry. We're really very sick and tired of hearing in the mainstream media or for gun control organizations to say, we're in a responsible industry, we don't care where the products end up. And we had the former governor of Connecticut at one point say that the industry, on CNN, say the industry just wants to sell as many guns as it can to crazy people and criminals. And, not only is that patently false, of course, it's hurtful. It's just hurtful. Because there are lots of men and women all across the country who, have jobs, that feed their family, they pay their taxes, and they make a legal product that is protected by the Second Amendment that tens of millions of Americans enjoy every day for lawful purposes, for hunting, target shooting, and obviously for self-protection. Our member companies, they make the firearms that law enforcement officers use every day to protect their communities and to go home to their families at their end of the shift.
Larry, the word gun control is basically a dirty word right now, regardless of what side you're on, right? If you're on the left or the right, or you're just sort of a patriotic man or woman in between who's trying to figure out what's going on. Right. Look at states like Virginia with the legislation that's already being proposed by incoming lawmakers. We're talking about bills that are being written that are so open to interpretation that we can see parents who are training their kids to hunt with a rifle convicted as felons based on certain interpretations. What is going on, man?
It's kind of shocking. Old Dominion has lost its mind. Some of these bills would ban all semi-automatic rifles, would not just ban them, it would confiscate them. People have lawfully have owned them for many, many years. Now all of a sudden they're going to be turned overnight into felons if these laws pass. And again, there are gun control groups that are supporting this. Mayor Bloomberg spent, several $1 million to make sure to elect an anti-gun legislature in Richmond to pass all of these initiatives. And so you're starting to see a reaction. In Virginia, you see, I think it's something like 60 counties now have declared themselves Second Amendment sanctuary cities, sort of modeling themselves on what happened in response to the illegal immigration issue, where cities are saying, we're sanctuary cities, we're not going to enforce the federal law. Two can play that game, so to speak. And so you have all these counties saying that they're not going to enforce these laws if they pass. And we saw that in upstate New York after Governor Cuomo rammed through his SAFE Act, so-called SAFE Act, county after county saying we're not going to enforce these laws. You saw the same thing in Colorado. After the tragedy in Sandy Hook rammed through gun control legislation, 64 of the 65 county sheriffs said we're not enforcing it.
But now it's gone to an extreme where last week we reported that the governor of Virginia is threatening to send in the National Guard to arrest sheriffs that don't comply. And now you've got counties that are saying, okay, we're going to form an active militia to back them. I mean, everything is
so
crazy.
Under Virginia law, I didn't know this. I learned this just the other day. So you do learn something new every day. That in Virginia, counties can form their own militia. And then if you're a member of the militia, they can have these firearms that they're trying to ban. So everyone in the county is a member of the militia. Now what are you going to do? I mean, it's just gotten really kind of silly. It just shows how divided this country is on the issue and how extreme some of the rhetoric is getting. And I think people should just take a deep breath and step back and try to find common ground. That's what our Real Solutions for Safer Community campaign is all about. It's the industry is doing responsible things. Like, for example, Project Child Safe, which we've been doing now for 20 years, where we've distributed firearm safety education kits in every state in the country, every U.S. territory, partnering with local law enforcement is our distribution partner. And it's a firearm safety education kit that comes with information about the importance of securing your firearm when it's not in use, so it's not accessible to unauthorized individuals. We provide as part of that a cable-style gun lock, which people can use. But it's really about the message about being a responsible gun owner, making sure your firearm is not accessible to unauthorized individuals when you're not using it. And that can be a child, that could be someone breaking into your house, it can be somebody in your family that's depressed, it might be suicidal. Whatever the situation is, make sure that the gun is not left laying about where somebody can get it and misuse it. To reduce accidents, we've distributed over 38 million firearm safety education kits as part of Project Child Safe. We've received awards for this. We've received grant funding from both Republican DOJs and Democrat DOJs. We received a grant from the Obama administration for Project Child Safe. And not all that long ago, the Government Accounting Office came out with a study, a report that looked at ways of trying to reduce accidents. And they looked at a whole manner of, a whole list of different initiatives. And they actually said the best way to make guns inaccessible is to provide a locking device, which is exactly what our program does. And it actually mentioned our program as a model for success. So we're very proud of that.
Larry, when you look at the mainstream media skewing data to make it look like gun deaths are happening in every household and in every school every day, one of the numbers that they roll in there, unbeknownst to a lot of people, are the number of suicides by gun. You guys have an initiative as part of this program.
Sure. So roughly 2/3 of all gun deaths are suicides. About 1/3 are homicides. Most of that is gang activity, gang-on-gang activity. In mass shootings, is a very, very, very small number, and it's not actually going up. And then you have accidents, there's like less than 1%. But people don't understand. They hear about, an epidemic of gun violence. Well, 2/3 of those are suicides. Yep. And so that's not to diminish, a suicide or a suicide involving a firearm, because about half of all suicides involve a firearm, and roughly 85% to 90% of attempted suicides with a firearm are successful for obvious reasons. So we have partnered with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, which is the largest suicide prevention organization in the country, to try to help them achieve their goal of reducing suicides by 20% by 2025. And that's a pretty steep challenge because, unfortunately, the rates of suicide are increasing across all demographics for a lot of different reasons. But so that's a very challenging goal. But we're working with them to get messages and information to ranges, to retailers, and to gun owners. What they say, or they describe as, have that brave conversation. Don't be afraid to talk to your friend, a family member, if you think they might be, suffering, depressed, they've had a major event in their life, loss of job, loss of a spouse, loss of a child, something really big like that. Have that conversation. Offer to take the firearms away from them, because what the suicide experts tell us is that suicide is very often not contemplated, not planned. It's very spontaneous. And so if you can disrupt the access to means, you can have an impact. And if you can do that and then get the person help, very often they say, oh, thank God I didn't act on that. So we're very proud of our partnership. It's having an impact. Some of the gun control groups have attacked our partner in that program. What are you doing working with the gun industry, the evil gun industry? But we're very proud of the partnership. We hope it's having an impact. It's certainly our intent to have an impact, because we don't want to see, suicides of any kind, and we certainly don't want to see suicides involving firearms.
It's an epidemic that hits the civilian market.
Sure.
It hits veterans. It hits law enforcement, fire. It is. We look at the numbers from last year, and the number of officers killed in the line of duty, whether it be killed on the job or by suicide, was actually greater than the number of people who were killed by rifles.
And it absolutely happens with police officers, sadly. They're under a lot of stress. They see they see things that the average person doesn't see that, really can take a toll on you emotionally. So, that's very important to us as well. We've distributed Project Child Safe kits to law enforcement agencies to give to their officers as well. I remember a number of years ago, we worked with the New York City PBA and gave them 25,000 locks to distribute to their officers. And that was in response to a terrible suicide that occurred with an officer in Staten Island. So it's very important for us that, when firearms are not in use, that they be secured and made inaccessible to unauthorized individuals who can't be trusted to use the firearm responsibly. And, there's many, many ways to accomplish that, right? I mean, a gun lock, a cable lock is one way, gun safes, many other ways. There's no firearm made today that can't be locked and made inaccessible some way. So and manufacturers have for decades now been providing a locking device with every new firearm they ship from their factory. Dealers have to have locking devices available at the point of purchase in the store. And again, manufacturers are providing them free when they ship the new firearm.
No doubt. Larry, what other programs do you guys have underway that people need to know about?
Well, the Real Solutions, it includes Project Child Safe, it includes our suicide prevention effort. But another program we've been doing with ATF for now 20 years next year is called Don't Lie for the Other Guy. And it's an anti-straw purchasing program to help ATF to educate dealers on what to be on the lookout for, how to identify potential would-be straw purchasers. And that's where somebody who can't purchase a firearm legally, they can't pass the background check, goes in and tries to convince somebody to go in and buy the gun for them. And the form that everyone fills out, the consumer fills out, with the retailer, it's called the Form 4473. It asks a question on the form: are you the actual purchaser? And if you're not, and you're buying it for somebody else, that's a crime. It's a federal crime. You can get up to 10 years in prison and a fine of up to $250,000. So before there was the NICS instant background check, where it was people used to do what's called lie and buy. You'd lie on the form, and there was no way for the dealer to check. Now they check you. They run you through NICS. So now you can't do that, right? If you're a private person, let's say a felony conviction. So now you recruit somebody to be the straw purchaser, the straw man buyer. So we don't want that happening, right? That's a way criminals get guns. Or you're a trafficker, right? And you just don't want your name associated with the transaction. So it helps ATF to educate the retailers what to be on the lookout for. We give the dealer, a DVD with it was developed with ATF, training material for their staff. And then the other part of the program is a public awareness campaign where we go out in communities. We do 2 or 3 a year. Where we'll come in and we'll buy outdoor media, whether it's radio, print, billboards, whatever is available in that market. And it's a public awareness campaign to the would-be straw purchaser to make them aware that this is a really serious crime. You can go to prison for 10 years, to the would-be straw purchaser long before they ever get inside the gun store. So we're very proud of that. ATF has actually called that vital, a vital effort for their goal of trying to combat violence with firearms. So we're really proud of that. And we also started an initiative after the tragedy in Sandy Hook, and NSSF's headquarters is in Newtown, Connecticut. A lot of people don't realize that, just literally a couple of miles from the school. And what we saw was, Virginia Tech was an example of that, and other examples along the way where somebody passed a background check because the records weren't in the system. Mm-hmm. So after NICS was passed, there was a lawsuit in the Supreme Court said that the federal government can't compel the states to put the records in under the 10th Amendment. So it has to be done voluntarily by the states. And unfortunately, a lot of states weren't doing it, or the records were very old and they were in the basement of some courthouse and the clerk didn't want to go down and look for them or didn't have time because they're doing the rest of their job. So we started after the tragedy in Sandy Hook that impacted a lot of people at NSSF who live in the community. What we call the Fix NICS campaign, because we've seen efforts in the past to throw money at the problem, but it really wasn't getting the job done. And then when we saw what happened in Sutherland Springs, it was even worse. But what NSSF did, this is the industry, nobody else, none of the gun control groups, not Mayor Bloomberg, not the Brady Center, the gun industry went out, and we changed the law in 16 states to require the states, under their own state law, to put the records into the background check system so that people would not be able to pass a background check when they shouldn't. And unfortunately, we saw a lot of states that weren't putting any records in. And it wasn't like, well, liberal eastern states put them in, but rural western states didn't. Montana didn't put records in, and Massachusetts didn't put records in. It was chiefly, what was really missing mostly were someone, mental defects, people adjudicated as mentally defective or involuntarily committed. That makes them a prohibited person under federal law. Those records were not being put into the background check system. And I'm not talking about the doctor's notes about what you said, but the adjudication, the document that establishes you're a prohibited person.
Was it because of HIPAA? Is that why
Well, it predates HIPAA. State privacy laws is primarily
Okay.
reason. Some states just didn't do it because they just didn't do it. But mostly it was a matter of state privacy laws. So you had to change the state law to allow the records to be put in.
Got it.
I'll give you a real world example of where this matters. And I give this example all the time. So we were working the Fix NICS initiative in Rhode Island after the Sandy Hook tragedy. And then the Washington Navy Yard shooting happens. There's a guy, paranoid schizophrenic, who's able to buy a pump shotgun at retail after pass a background check in Virginia. We found out from the news reporting that shortly before the incident, he had been in Rhode Island on a work assignment. He was working for a defense contractor that was working for the Navy. He was on a work assignment in Rhode Island, off his rocker in his motel room. The police get called. They take him to an emergency room. Now, he was not admitted to a state mental hospital in Rhode Island. They did whatever they did, and then they let him go. And then he went back to Virginia. But even had he been involuntarily committed in Rhode Island, eventually he would have gotten out. He would have gone back to Virginia, and he would have been able to pass the background check because Rhode Island wasn't putting the records into the background check system at that time. So when we were working the bill, we were not getting anywhere. The legislature wanted to do a study, send it and have a study done. And that's kind of code for kill the bill, right? Instead of voting no, they just put it over here and
Table it for now.
Table it for now. We went back to the legislature and said, look what happened. This guy, even had you involuntarily committed, he still would have been able to pass the background check, buy the shotgun, and kill those people in the Washington Navy Yard because you don't put the records in the system. Within 24 hours, they passed the bill.
Wow. You bring up Sutherland Springs. It's interesting. We were in Texas with Steven, who stopped the shooter a few weeks ago. Steven's the guy who made me buy that hat over there.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Steven's a character, first of all. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that shortly after, Joe Biden, your next president, according to him, came out and said that even though Steven had stopped that shooter, he never should have been allowed to have that AR-15.
Unbelievable.
This is the world that we're in. Like, that dude ran out barefoot
Right.
with an AR-15
Right.
and engaged the shooter, and he
With
got
cartridges in his pocket, he didn't even have a fully loaded magazine.
well, and then he's being shot at.
Right.
He hits the guy. I believe he said 5 times. The guy takes off. He
He
flags
chases,
down
right.
a guy driving down,
Right.
and the guy says, "What's the matter?" He said, "That dude just shot up my church." He said, "Well, get in. We got to go kill him." I mean,
Right.
but I think it's so important to recognize too. Different parts of the country have different understandings of firearms.
Yeah.
Out in Texas, an AR-15 is very common. We travel the country a lot. We spend time in Utah and Montana and Wyoming, where backup, we were on the border last week, backup is an hour and a half away.
Yeah. People in urban centers don't get that. And I'll tell you, we launched the Fix NICS initiative, and we had great success so far. As I said, 16 laws we've changed. We've increased the records going into the background check system, the disqualifying mental health records, by over 240% in about 4 years.
Wow.
And we're continuing to work on it. There are 3 states that still don't report, Wyoming, Montana, and New Hampshire. But we're committed to continuing to work on that. But after Sutherland Spring happened, we weren't aware that DOD wasn't putting the records in. And it wasn't just the Air Force, it was all of DOD, right? And we worked with Senator Cornyn, because he was obviously very frustrated by what had taken place. He named his Fix NICS bill. It was modeled after and named after our program. And the lead co-sponsor was Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut, hardly a friend of the firearms industry, yet not once did he ever acknowledge that the bill was named after our initiative or that we had anything to do with it. But that's his problem. Yeah. But, and that's now law of the land, and the records, the DOJ just came out with a report about the impact that Fix NICS Act is having, and it's substantially increasing the disqualifying records, improving the accuracy and quality of the background checks, which we think is more important than like expanding it to so-called universal background checks. You're just going to have more bad background checks.
Right.
The system has to work the way it was designed and the way the public thinks it works, and it doesn't because the records aren't put in there. So we're very proud of the Fix NICS Act for sure. And I've never met him, but I've seen him speak, and he is a very impressive man.
Spectacular.
That's the bravery that he could have just stayed where he was.
Yep.
He could have hit under, hit the deck and just ignored it and hoped it went away. That's a brave man, and he saved lives.
Yep.
He distracted that shooter.
Well, you guys will see his full interview coming up in a couple of weeks here. Brother, how can people learn more about the organization?
Just go to nssf.org and you can learn about all of our initiatives and programs that are part of the Real Solutions campaign. We didn't even mention another part of the program is we're working with ATF on what we call Operation Secure Store. ATF came to us a couple of years ago and said, there's a big increase recently in smash and grab burglaries of gun stores.
Yep.
And they said they think it's because the Don't Lie program's been so successful that instead of buying, just trying to buy one gun, two guns.
Now they're going to steal them and take them
steal
all.
them all. It's the former director of ATF, Tom Brandon, told us that he would testify in Congress. They respond 100% of the time to every single burglary. And they put a lot of resources into trying to recover the guns and capture those who are responsible. And he said, Larry, it's to ATF, burglaries of gun stores are like bank robberies are to the FBI. And why do you rob gun stores? Because that's where the guns are, to paraphrase Willie Sutton. So we've launched Operation Secure Store to help educate retailers if it's an issue, to increase their security measures, to prevent this. And it's all about building time, as your audience understands as law enforcement. Building time so that the police can get there and respond. Because these guys, it's gang activity. They're in and out in under a minute and a half, 2 minutes at max. So we're very proud of that. We actually have legislation that we're supporting called the FFL Protection Act that would increase penalties for stealing guns from FFLs, fortunately, from 10 to 20 years. The Senate bill by Senator Graham, from the chairman of Judiciary, has mandatory minimums, which we like a lot. 3 years for burglaries, 5 years for robberies. Robberies are still rare, but obviously you would think robbing a gun store would be a special kind of stupid, but it does happen, sadly, and there have been fatalities.
Yeah.
So we're really proud of that. We want to see that. We're hoping that will move as part of Police Week. The lead Republican sponsor in the House is John Rutherford. He's a former sheriff from Florida. He's very supportive of the bill, obviously. So we're really, really proud of that. We hope it makes a difference. But go to nssf.org and you can learn all about our activities in this regard. And we have, for SHOT Show, plug on SHOT Show, it's the largest law enforcement show in the country, if you just broke out the law enforcement section. And there's lots of training and seminars at the show for law enforcement. It's not just come look at the cool toys and the guns and stuff, but there's educational opportunities for law enforcement that we put on at the show. So it's not just, to come play in Vegas for a couple of days. It's actually an educational opportunity for law enforcement. And law enforcement buyers are very important to us.
No doubt. Well, and
you do get to go to Vegas.
Yeah, that is true, for better or for worse. I mean, and not just law enforcement. You have a lot of training outside of there. I was one of the speakers of the Executive Management Summit last year, and the programs that you guys put on are spectacular.
Lots of seminars for retailers, seminars for ranges. We just had the Range Expo. There's SHOT Show University for retailers, how to, just not just compliance, but how to be better, better businessman or
better
woman.
Marketers.
Better marketer, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the whole plethora of things you need to do.
And like you said, it's Vegas.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you all so much for watching. Brother, thank you for
having
on
us.
and
It's really
doing
been
this.
great.
Of course. As always, we end this episode with the faces of the fallen officers in 2019, set to Dave Bray's Last Call. Thanks for watching. God bless America.
Man down, I'm bleeding out. There's no time no time, so please hear me out. These are the last few words that I'd like to say to you all. This is my last call. Tell my wife I love her and that I won't be home tonight. Thank her for those long, hard years that we tried to get it right. And tell her I'll be waiting after she makes it through it all. This is my last call. But ask her to forgive me. Tell her I'm sorry. That I can't be the man that she's gonna need. Tell her I'll be waiting where the winter meets the fall. This is my last call. And tell my children that I love them. Oh yeah, that daddy always loved them so. And tell them to hold their mother tight and to never let her go. And tell them I'll always be watching, looking over them through it all. This is my last call. Tell him to fight for me. Do what's right for me. Choose the light for me. But don't ever forget me. Tell them I'll always be watching, and I'll be there when they fall. This is my last call. For those who served beside me and who held that thin blue line, stand tall, stand strong, and hold your head up high. I'm sorry I let you down today, but please know I gave my all. This is my last call. So raise a glass for me. And kick some ass for me. Ring a bell for me. Send a flag to hell for me. I'd like to think I saved a few good lives, but I couldn't save them all. This is my last call. Yeah, I'd like to think I saved a few good lives, but I couldn't save my own. This is my last call.